This video will cover the full process of carpet installation, from what supplies to use, how to carpet the deck, how to carpet the compartment lids, how to cut corners, how to cut seams, and so much more. So let's go ahead and get started. So I'm to the point where I'm finally ready to start cutting out the new carpet. And as you can see, I just have the old front deck section laid out here on the carpet that I have rolled out. And I basically just took a marker and outlined around the edge about, an inch, 2 inches out. So I'm gonna go through and cut the carpet off there, and I'll do the final trimming once I get it up on the boat. But a super critical aspect of this is this arrow right here. I'm not sure how well you can make that out, but I have a bunch of arrows drawn all over this carpet, and they're all pointing in this direction because every compartment and every deck section of the boat needs to have the carpet running the same direction as it comes off the roll. Because if it doesn't, there's a good chance, most likely, it's not gonna be the same color. So like, the carpet's gonna look a different color if you look at it from a different angle, and it's just not gonna match right. So that's something super critical you need to pay attention to. So I wanna show you all the carpet I'm using for this, guys. So this is 24-ounce carpet I bought from Basscat Boats website. So they have like a part store on their website, and one of the many things they sell is carpet. So that's where I purchased this from. This is storm colored, and I believe what this is it's Syntec Carpet is the brand. So you can buy that multiple different places, but honestly, a lot of the other places I found had it in 25-foot pieces, and you can buy it in 30-foot pieces off Basscat's website, which when you're buying carpet, you generally want to get 10 feet longer than what your boat is. So mine's a 21-foot boat, so I bought 30 feet of carpet, which was the most you could buy in one piece. When you're buying carpet, I'm going to say the same thing I said about the pad. I didn't buy the cheapest pad. I didn't buy the cheapest carpet. I bought some of the more expensive of all of it. But you get what you pay for, and it's a lot of work, or you're going to pay somebody to do a lot of work on this, and you don't want to have to redo it again in 5 years. You want to get decent quality materials. It's going to make it a lot better in the end, and I think you're going to be happier with it. Before we can worry about gluing this carpet down, the first step is to make sure the deck is cleaned off. So you want to make sure you get all the chemicals, all the dust and everything off so the new adhesive can stick to it properly. So to do this, basically just vacuum it off and follow that up by wiping it down with acetone. That'll get rid of all the dust and all the chemicals or anything that might be on the deck. So now you take the piece of carpet that you just cut out around the outline of the old carpet, place it on the front deck, and just kind of roll it out. And what you want to check for, you want to make sure there's no wrinkles, basically just wrinkles from where the carpet was rolled on the roll for shipping. You want to make sure that all of those are kind of pushed out. If you have to, take a hairdryer or something to warm up the carpet, to warm up the backing of the carpet, and kind of fold it backwards to help smooth those wrinkles out. That'll just make it harder to lay the carpet perfectly flat on the deck once you're ready to install it. So then once you have it put on the front deck and it's where you want to be, everything looks good with it, just want to check all the edges, make sure none of the edges are short or anything. You'll go ahead and you can put something heavy on the carpet so it doesn't move, or at least on part of it so that part doesn't move. Then you want to pick up the edges and just want to go ahead and mark on the underside of the carpet how far you want to glue out. So basically what you want to do is you want to glue 2 to 3 inches away from the edge of where the carpet's going to be once it's trimmed. And the reason for this is that once we glue down this middle section, we'll fold the rest of the carpet down, and when it's cut off, you'll be able to cut it really precise. You'll know exactly where it's going to be or where it needs to be because that carpet's already glued down, and it'll make it a lot easier to cut the edge of the carpet precisely on the front deck. So this is the glue I'm using for this project, and I'm planning to use this everywhere. A lot of guys use this contact cement in certain places. This also comes in handy when you're doing like the compartment lids. So you don't have to clamp, it just makes the whole process a lot easier. And the contact cement that I would recommend using is the DAP Weldwood Original. This stuff you can buy at Home Depot or probably any local hardware store. But you want to use the original formula. There's also a non-flammable formula, but it isn't as waterproof. It's not going to hold up as good. Marine carpet goes through a lot. It gets wet, sitting out in the sun all day. So you definitely want to use the original formula for this application. So now that we have the carpet laid on the front deck of the boat and the part that we want to glue outlined, we'll go ahead and flip up the front half of the carpet. And now we can go ahead and start using the contact cement. So basically for contact cement, you coat both sides of what you want to glue together, let it dry, and then push them together and they'll be bonded together permanently. To do this, basically just coat the back side of the carpet, the top of the front deck, wait for it to dry, and for the DAP Weldwood, what the instructions say is to wait 20 minutes, or what you can also do is when you put your finger on it and your finger comes back clean, you don't get any strings, it doesn't stick to your finger at all, then you know it's dry, and then you can go ahead and fold the carpet down. Then you want to make sure that you get good adhesion, and to do that you just need to push extra hard, make sure that all the surface contacts each other so that there's maximum contact between the glue. And to do this you can use a roller, you can just push with your hand, you can use a mallet, it doesn't really matter, there's multiple methods there. Then once you get the front half done, you basically just do the exact same thing for the back half. So now that the main section of carpet is glued down, you can start trimming the edges. To do this, you want to roll the edge of the carpet up to the point that you can see where the carpet needs to be trimmed. So then you can either take a marker and mark where it needs to be trimmed, or once you get the hang of it, you can go ahead and just trim it off. Probably a good idea, if you're new to this, to start out marking it, and then once you get some confidence in it and you get an eye for where you need to cut it, you can go ahead and just start trimming it after that. And when you're trimming this, it's a good thing to remember that you can always trim off more, but it's a lot harder to add carpet to it. So, it may be good to be conservative on that side, but not too conservative. One advantage of using carpet is that it is pretty forgiving. The carpet fuzz is going to cover up a lot. So if you have a little bit of a gap where it doesn't quite make it, the carpet fuzz is going to cover it. But you're not going to want to have a gap everywhere. It's not going to lay in there right. And if you do have too big of a gap in an area where the carpet fuzz doesn't cover it, you can just take, a scrap piece of carpet. You'll have plenty of scrap pieces of carpet, and just trim a little section off to fill in that gap and glue that down in there, and it's really not that big of a deal. But ideally, you wouldn't have to use any of that. So now I've got to cut off all these edges and cut these corners and everything. So basically, on an inside corner like this one right here, you kind of want to feel around with your finger, find the corner. Okay, so there's the corner. And then I'm just going to take a knife, cut down, cut a little bit away from the corner. You don't want to cut right on the edge of the fiberglass, so cut a little bit away from the corner. And then just cut directly out at a 45-degree angle from both the sides. And you can always cut more, and also a little bit will help roll over the edge, and it won't be an obvious seam right there on the carpet. So it'll help kind of hide that seam a little bit. Cut that one up just a little further. All right, so that looks pretty good. So when I cut these edges, this side here, right, so all the carpet is ran this way with these seams here between the edges, which cut really well, and you can kind of follow it with your knife. So I'm gonna roll this down like this on this edge and kind of roll it over and say, okay, so that's where it's gonna be pinched at. I probably need to cut this off about right here. So I'm just gonna cut that out. All right, so when I roll this over, well, I probably need to cut that one just a little bit further. So when I roll this over, I'm just a little bit long, so it's starting to roll over onto this bottom piece, so I probably need to cut off, 1 or 2 more rows. I'm gonna go with 2. It doesn't hurt to have this a little short. You don't really see it anyway. Okay. So now that looks really good. That's perfect. So now I can just follow this seam, or not this seam, but this carpet row the rest of the way down. And then I know that's gonna be pretty straight because, well, I cut this seam over here where that is all straight. So it's gonna line up, this is gonna line up with this. So this is gonna be good to cut. Also, this doesn't have to be 100% perfect. So if it's a little crooked, it's not the end of the world. Okay, so cut that seam off. Then when I roll that down, that looks really good, so pretty happy with that. So on this edge, I can't follow a carpet row because they run the other direction. So I'm just gonna roll this over, make sure it's down there good and tight, pinch it, fold this up, then take this knife and just cut right along. Probably can't see that. Just cut right along the base of that bend. Flip this back down. Okay, that's long. This next time I'm gonna cut a little deeper. Okay. That looks pretty good. I'm not sure if you can see that or not, but it fits about like this side did over here. This is tricky. You could, if there's more room, you can kind of get a knife in here and just cut right along the fiberglass, because you're not going to see the little mark on the fiberglass. It's going to be covered up with the carpet or be right on the edge of the carpet. But I can't really do that here, so I'm just going to roll this over. And when you, so if you seam, hold this down and pinch that over and roll this back up, you'll kind of be able to follow the same point on that bend. It'd be easier if I was left-handed for this cut. You know, kind of just check as you go. Make sure you're not going too crazy. The edge doesn't have to be 100% perfect because it's carpet. It'll kind of hide some of the imperfections. So just kind of cut a little more. I just work my way down, especially on a short edge like this. Okay, so there we go. That looks pretty darn straight. Looks pretty good. So now I get to this edge here. So I'm just going to take my knife and basically just follow this edge. You can always cut more off. Just keep that in mind when you're doing these seams. I'm just gonna cut that out. I'm gonna come in on this side and do the same thing. Find one of these carpet seams going this way that looks to be in the right spot. About right there. Okay, get that out of the way. So now when I fold this down, that looks pretty good. By the time I glue that and pinch all this together, that's gonna be pretty good. Got a couple little strands sticking out here, just cut those off. Now that the carpet's trimmed along the edges, we can go ahead and start gluing it down. So once again, you wanna make sure that you get all this cleaned off. So you just take a vacuum and vacuum out underneath the edges to make sure that there's no carpet particles. There's gonna be all kinds of junk underneath there. Just make sure all that's vacuumed up. Then, of course, you're gonna go ahead and put glue on both sides again. And underneath these edges, it's sometimes easier just to kind of pour the glue in there and then just kind of rub it around with both sides to get the glue on both sides. You can also use a brush. It just depends kind of on the placement and how it works as far as which one's easier. When the glue's drying though, you do want to make sure that obviously the two sides need to stay apart so the glue dries properly. And what we actually did is we just used some scrap carpet that we had laying around, cut it into little triangles, and use that to help keep the two sides of the carpet off each other so it would dry properly. Then, just like we did before, we'll go ahead and fold the carpet down, and then push it down and make sure it makes good contact. And along the edges, if you're having trouble getting the carpet tucked in underneath the trim or whatever else you have on the side of your boat, you'll want to take one of these tools which just looks like a dull file and just use that to hammer that carpet up underneath that trim so the edge gets down in there good. It also helps to make sure that the edge is, is really adhered properly, because if the carpet's going to start coming off, the edge is going to be where it starts. So you want to make sure the edge is glued down very well. So the carpet up here on the front deck is almost done. Just one small finishing touch to add up is every time you get one of these inside corners, there's going to be a little gap here in the carpet. So just take a piece of carpet. I like to kind of set it down in there and say, okay, I need to cut it about right here. Actually, first I'm going to cut this. First I'm going to cut this off straight on the bottom, just to start with something easy to work with. And if I mess up this scrap piece of carpet, I've got plenty more. Okay, so now we got this cut straight. I just take it, lay it down in there about what it looks like, and put my finger on it and say, okay, so right here is where the end of that corner needs to be. Cut that off. Stick it down in there. Yeah, that's about right. So I look at the height and and a lot of these corners won't be quite straight. This one is angled this way a little bit, so when I cut this, I know that my corner needs to be angled over that way. So then just stick it in and see what it looks like, and if you're happy with it, use it. If you're not happy with it, think you can do better, just cut you another one. This one is, honestly, it's not perfect, but the rod locker is going to be here. You're never really going to see this corner anyway. I'm going to call it good enough and move on to the next task. So So now I've just got to glue this in with my contact cement again. So pretty straightforward. So then you pretty well just follow this exact same process for all the different parts of the deck, the floor and the bottom of the boat, and the panel underneath the seats. Then the only part remaining is the compartment lids. So you start out, of course, by cutting the carpet out, and you kind of want to plan it out a little bit on how you're going to cut the compartment lids out of the carpet on the roll. But once again, when you're cutting these out, you absolutely want to make sure that they're all pointed in the same direction. So as I mentioned earlier in the video, I have arrows drawn all over the carpet, and you'll see me add some to the pieces that I cut out as well, just to double check to make sure they're all marked as far as which direction is facing forwards on the boat. And when you cut these pieces out for the compartment lids, you want to make sure that you leave plenty of carpet on all sides, because it has to roll up and into the inside of the compartment lid. It has to roll all the way in to go underneath. Then we can start working on putting the carpet on the compartment lids. So this is the process that I use for carpeting these compartment lids. So this compartment lid, it's already been cleaned off in the previous video. And as you just saw, we already have all the carpet cut out for these compartments, you know, measured and everything. So now I'm just gonna go ahead and take a vacuum and just clean off all the loose stuff that was scraped off of this. Here's the carpet, and you can see this arrow, got 2 arrows on this. These arrows point towards the front, right, as we've discussed. And this particular compartment, the hinge points towards the front of the boat. So the side with these holes on it needs to go on the same side that the arrows are pointing to. So now basically this compartment just needs to have enough room around all the edges for the carpet to wrap over, and there's plenty of room around it, as you can see. So I'm going to go ahead and outline this compartment on the carpet. And basically this outline will be used for when we use the contact cement. Okay, so now that we have this outline, we got our compartment ready, we can go ahead and just apply the contact cement to this rectangle in the middle and this top side of this compartment. And I'm just gonna do this with a brush. You know, this is big enough, you could use a roller, but this brush is dirty from a smaller compartment I did a little bit ago, so it won't take too long. And when you're spreading this contact cement, you wanna go a little bit over the edge. It doesn't hurt to go a little over, but you definitely wanna be at least to the edge. So err on the side of putting too much on than not enough. And basically, you know you have enough glue on this if you can see a shine, like a glossy finish on the material. So then once it dries, it'll kind of matte back up. Okay, then you just want to look over everything, make sure there's not any spots you've missed, and then you just let it dry. So wait a little while, and now we can touch around on this. And you know, the fingers come back clean, so that means that this contact cement has dried. So now we take this compartment and set it here on top of this rectangle that we drew out a while ago, and then we'll just press it down. So of course, got to pay attention to these arrows like I mentioned earlier. So that side should be the hinge. Then just do your best to make sure it's lined up properly. Kind of line up the corners. Oh, that corner's right, no, that corner's right. And everything looks pretty good. Now we just press it down. So now that we got this flipped over, we'll just push around on it. If you got a roller, that works really good too, but I'm just gonna use my palm on this area. Okay, so now that top side's done. So now that we've got this flipped over, it's a good idea to go ahead and check that these holes are marked. And I talked about this in my carpet removal video, but basically you got to mark these holes for this hinge before we roll this carpet over, because once you roll this carpet over, you won't be able to see these holes anymore, and you won't know where you need to put your screws through, or drill your holes to put your screws through. So it's just a good idea to go ahead and double check that those are still in place. These are marked. So now we'll start cutting off these corners. So the way I do this is, all right, so this is gonna flip over. So I'm gonna have to cut the excess off here and cut the excess off here so it fits inside this compartment lid. So the way I do this, I just take a straight edge and I just put it alongside this compartment. And you don't want the edge to necessarily get up underneath the compartment. So if you have to lift it up just a little bit, just take a utility knife and start cutting right here along this edge, and then just cut all the way out. So So then because I cut along the straight edge, it's a perfect, nice straight cut. So that won't be an issue. And then just go ahead and do this 8 times, twice on each one of these corners. And so like this corner here comes up a little short, but the good thing about carpet is that it's flexible. You can always stretch it a little bit. So when I go to do this corner, I'll just have to make sure I really pull over on this to get it all the way over. And that's the good thing. This contact cement makes it a lot easier where you can make those adjustments. With traditional glue, if I did that, it would just come back. But with this contact cement, if I pull it over and push it up, it'll stay stuck right where I put it. So that's very helpful. Okay, so now I will need to go ahead and cut these flaps off. And so basically you just want these to come in just short of, all the way down to touching the lid. There really isn't any reason to go all the way to the lid. The carpet fuzz will kind of hide it if you don't get all the way there, and it'll make it easier to wrap it around if it doesn't go all the way down to the bottom. So basically how I do this is I just measure the inside space. So the inside space there is like 1 1/8 inch. So then I just pull this up nice and tight, and then I bend that over, and I take this ruler upside down, put it on the carpet, and put it up against the inside lip here, then just flip this over. So then take a marker and mark 1 1/8 inch. Okay, so now I have that marked. Then I just go and measure from the outside of this panel to that mark, and so that is basically right at 2 3/4 inch. So now I know I just need to go and mark 2 3/4 inch, a couple places along here, a couple places along here, and then you'll notice this side is shorter. The side with the hinge on it, the metal is shorter than the other sides. So I'll have to remeasure this one. It's going to be different, but all these sides, these 3 sides will all be 2 3/4 inch. And you can actually cut this a little short. So it was right at 2 3/4. So I'm probably going to actually cut this at 2 5/8. So basically an 1/8 inch short. Okay, so now that we've got that marked, we can move on to cutting these edges off. So this ruler has a metal side on it, so I'm just going to line that metal up with these marks. Hold the ruler down and then basically just cut right along the edge. Then from the other side. So then when I roll this over, it should just barely not touch, and that looks pretty darn good. I'm very happy with that. Okay, so now I just need to repeat that process for all the rest of the sides. Okay, so now these edges are cut off, we should be ready to go. The one thing is, so I've got this little this is the attachment where the gas cylinder for the compartments attaches, and as you can see, it isn't going to let this carpet fold over right. So the way it was from the factory is it had little notches cut out of the carpet, so that's probably what I'll have to do again. So basically I just drew out, an approximate shape of this, just because it's going to be very hard with that contact cement to get this in there properly. So you don't want to get it, contact cemented in the wrong spot, obviously, because you won't be able to move it. So basically I'll just gonna cut this little corner out that I outlined, and that'll help it fold over better. Okay, yeah, so that looks pretty good. I mean, you can't tell that there's anything missing back there at all, but it folds over much better. I don't think that's gonna cause any issues, so I'm pretty happy with that. Okay, so now that we got the carpet edges cut off, we can go ahead and start putting the contact cement on it. So basically just start on one edge and work our way around. You just want to apply this thick enough that it's shiny. So when I get to these edges, I always like to get some of the contact cement all the way on the edge of the carpet, especially on the edge of the backing, because when I push these two seams together, I push the edges of this backing together and this carpet together, and you kind of want it to stick together. It'll help keep that seam closed up. So I'm just going to kind of paint this on the seam, or on the backing especially, and then just kind of work it a little bit of the way down the carpet. Now I have the carpet covered in glue. Do the same thing to the metal. You of course want to get all the sides. You got to get the inside or the outside, this top edge, as well as the inside. You want to make sure you don't miss this top edge though. So you just want to give it a quick once over glance, make sure you didn't miss anywhere, and it will start to dry. It'll start to look more of a matte color, or it'll start to have more of a matte finish when it dries, but you should be able to tell if you touch it and it's not sticky, then you know it didn't get any contact cement there. So then just move on and do the same thing for all the sides. Okay, so now that's done, and typically by the time I get all the way to the other side, it has dried. So let's just look over this real quick. Ooh, that's still kind of tacky actually. So I'll need to let that dry a little bit longer. It looks like everything on the metal is dry, but there's this one thick area here on the carpet, and most of the carpet's dry, most of it's good to go, but there is one little area here that's still wet. So give this a few more minutes and then we'll roll this over. And here's a little tip for you. I'm doing this in winter in a heated garage, but it's not quite as warm as it could be. So if you have a thick area, you got a little too much glue on it, just take a blow dryer or something. You know, a heat gun's probably gonna be too much, but just put a blow dryer on it for a couple minutes and it'll be good to go pretty quick. So now when I touch it, my finger comes back clean, so I know we're ready to go. So how I'm gonna do this is I'm gonna start in the middle, because you don't want any bubbles in it. I'm gonna start in the middle and roll it up to this edge, and then I'm gonna work my way out. And as I do that, I'm gonna pull on these edges, because like I said, I had this one corner, I think it was this corner, came up just a little bit short when I kind of test fitted a while ago, so I'm gonna wanna pull that out and make sure it's out far enough that these two corners, these two edges from the adjacent ears here, if that's what you want to call it, will actually touch and meet, make a good seam there on that edge. So I'm going to start in the middle, roll this up on this first edge. So now I'm going to take this corner with my finger and pull out on it, and I'm just going to work my way over towards that edge. Okay. I'll do the exact same thing going the opposite direction. Pull out here on this edge and use this hand and roll this up, and you want to make sure this all gets pushed down on here tight. So you want to kind of work your way from the bottom up, make sure you don't get any bubbles in there. Okay, looks good. So I'm going to go ahead and roll this the rest of the way down. Once again, starting in the middle, you want to make sure you get this rolled all the way. So you want to use pretty good force, push down on that, and then just work your way to the edge. Got a little fluff sticking up there. Just trim it off and go the other way. And this is where this contact cement is very handy, because if you were using regular carpet glue, you'd have to put like wood or metal along here and clamp this to hold this in place. But with this contact cement, you just roll it over and it's going to stay. It's good to go. So it makes it much nicer. Okay, so basically then moving on to the next side, just do the exact same thing. And do the same thing, go in the opposite direction. Okay, and as I rolled this up, I could kind of tell that the edge of this backing was meeting up right with the edge of this backing, so that's going to be a really good seam. That's exactly what you want. You just kind of want to watch that and, you know, adjust how much you pull over while you're going around. I knew I didn't have to pull real hard on this one because it looked like it was going to meet up with this one pretty good. So now, when it comes to rolling this over, this carpet here is already sticking out. So I can cut off a good little bit of this carpet. Otherwise, it's going to hit this carpet when it rolls over, and it's just going to kind of make more of a mess, and it's going to be difficult to roll over. So I'm just going to cut off, you know, a little bit, not quite to where it meets the outside of this other carpet that's rolled over. Now we take this and roll this over just like we did with the last one. So now that we have all that rolled over, you just want to make sure you get all this pushed down good. So I'm just going to go ahead and double check that all this is pushed in. You want to make sure. Compressing this is really what makes that contact cement stick. So there we go. Now we have a completed compartment lid. And I mean, look at those corners aren't too bad. I mean, there you can see that there's something there, but I mean, there's no way to get it good enough that you're not gonna be able to tell there's anything there. And honestly, this is hid most of the time, unless you have the compartment open anyway. I mean, if you fluff that up, it'll look a little better too. Honestly, a lot of what you see there is just the bend in the carpet. When you bend the carpet, it kind of, you know, spreads out. It looks kind of obvious, but so there you go. I'm happy with that. I'm very pleased with that. One compartment down, and just got to do that same process for all the rest of them. So it ends up looking pretty good. So now to install these compartment lids, basically start out with these marks for the holes we made here on the compartment. Just take a needle and kind of walk your way up till you find that hole. Okay, there's the hole. See, the needle came through. So now just take this marker and place that hinge there where it belongs, you know, about where it's going to go. I know, so this compartment goes on that side. Based on my marks here, this is how the hinge is going to go on the boat. If this compartment lid opens up, it's going to be just like this. So I'm just going to mark the edges of this hinge. And so this, what I'm going to do here is, if your compartment lids are a little tight. So the compartment lids with this new carpet are a little bit snug. So I'm going to just trim this carpet up a little bit where these hinges go, and that's just going to help create a little more room for this carpet. And it's going to get a little looser just because the carpet's going to wear, get matted over. But this will definitely help the process along, and you don't ever see this, right? Because it's going to be behind the hinge here. So now I can take this needle out. So this is just a regular hair trimmers. So now I just cut inside these marks here that I've made. So when I cut these, I cut right until where this edge starts to roll over. And that's just to retain this nice rolled edge, you know, on the end of this compartment lid on top of that hinge when that goes on there. Just, you know, help everything look nice and uniform when we're done. Okay, nothing has to be perfect about this. It's, you know, it's going to be covered up by the hinge. It's going to be inside the hinge, but just give it a little more space if you have that issue. If not, you don't have to worry about this. So now that I've got this cut out, I just take my needle and find these marks here on the inside again that marks these holes. Stick that needle through. Then take the drill. Fit that hinge on there. Basically, just hold it in place just to mark the hole. Pull that needle out, and then drill that hole out. So now take one of the machine screws and just screw that in. Okay. Then basically just go to the other side. Hold the hinge about where it looks like it belongs. Okay, there we go. Get one of those machine screws. Just pinch the hinge so it doesn't move. Drill the hole. Then basically just repeat this process for the rest of them. You don't have to use the needle for the rest of them because they're all lined up, and then just go through. And as I go, I put the nut on the back side. Now that I got those two end ones done, I can just take this drill real quick and just drill out all these holes. And then once I'm done with that, I'll go through and put the screws and the nuts on, and then just go through and snug it up, and you're good to go. So I'm ready to put this compartment lid on the boat now. And so I've got my marks here. So I just need to go ahead and take this needle and find my hole. Okay. So that should be the first hole. Now this part's easier if you have two people. I'm just here by myself. So I go and slide that over that needle. And you want to probably need to go ahead and get a screw ready to go. So now I've got a screw ready to go. Put it on the impact. Kind of stays on there. Okay, so now I go and slide this over that needle and just, you know, kind of get it on there and just hold it in place. Just, you need to rest the compartment lid on my knee or whatever I have to do. So it's definitely, you gotta mess around with it, find what works. After you get this first one in, it's a lot easier. Okay, so that's kind of holding itself in place. I'm gonna try it like that. Don't want to lose your needle though. It's a good way to hurt yourself later. Okay, now we got our first screw in. Just kind of snug that up a little bit. Then I'm gonna go all the way to the other side and just do basically the exact same thing here. Hopefully everything should line up because I'm using the same hinges in the same place on the same compartment lid that has the same holes in it for the other side of the hinges. So it should be right around here somewhere. Okay, there we go. It's a little bit lower. Get this screwdriver with the screw on it ready. Careful not to knock the screw off. There we go. All right, so now I've got the first two started. The rest of these should be easier. Take my needles, check and see if that hole lines up. Hopefully it should. We're just a little bit on the bottom side of that hole, so just have to note that when I'm putting this in. Maybe push down on this a little bit, or pick that up, it'll move it down. Okay, there we go. So now that we've got the two outside screws in on both of the hinges on both sides of this compartment, we should be able to just go ahead and screw in the rest of these screws. You can take a needle and you'll just double check, but everything should be lined up. So I think that compartment lid falling back is trying to push these hinges up. So I'm gonna go ahead and just put this gas cylinder on here. Basically just snaps on, or it should just snap on, there we go. So then hopefully that will help. Yeah, okay, so that one's centered up pretty good. All right, so now I got all those screws in there snug. So I'm gonna go through with a normal screwdriver and tighten them up as tight as they need to be. And you know, it's just going into fiberglass, so you don't want it to be too overly tight, but you want it to be snug. All right, so I've got all the screws in now, and the compartment lid is ready to go. And it's a little snug, but you know, I think that's gonna loosen up. So it looks great, I'm happy with it. So the last step for the carpet on this boat is cutting out these holes for the seat pedestal. So as you can see here, I basically took pictures beforehand going from the trolling motor foot pedal hole. The first one is at 11.5. Second one's basically at 17.5. So I already cut out the first one. I'll show you how I did this. So one way you could do this is basically taper it like I did on the edge, right? Where you taper the foam down. But I don't use these seats a whole lot. So what I did is I just took the foam and the carpet, put it over it like normal, took that measurement. So I know that it should be right at 17.5. Make sure this is good and straight. So then take this needle at 17.5. Should poke through. Yep, okay. So now, using this X-Acto knife again, I'm just going to poke down beside the needle. Oh, about to lose my needle. Okay, pull the needle out so you don't lose it. Put it back away. You don't want to leave needles laying around all over your carpet. So then I'm just going to cut to the edge. Okay, so there's one edge. Cut back to the other edge. Basically, I'm just going to cut this hole like a pizza somewhat. So I'm going to cut it into 4 sections. Okay, I'm really close to that edge. A little on the right, but that's fine. I'm going to cut over this way. Okay, so now I've got this cut into 4 different sections. And then I'm just going to cut this out. This X-Acto knife, just because it's smaller, works a little bit better for this than a regular razor blade knife. I mean, you could probably use a regular razor blade knife, but this works pretty good. Just kind of feel around where it needs to be trimmed up a little more. Basically, just cut, straight up from the edge of the hole. The reason I say if you use your pedestals a lot, you might want to taper it. It's just because this is going to push down the foam when I put the seat pedestal in. But if I use this once or twice a year, which is about all I use it, it's not going to be a big deal. The foam's going to pop back up, and you'll basically hardly be able to see that these holes are even here. All right, so then just make sure it fits. And the hole looks a little ragged. It's just because all the carpet fuzz, isn't quite regular. You can straighten that out a little bit if you want, but it fits. Everything works as it should, so that should work. So now that I've cut all these out, I'm just going to take some of this seaming glue. I'm just going to put it right on the edge of the carpet, just to make sure this carpet doesn't start unraveling and start losing these, these strands coming off of it. And it, might make the carpet kind of hard, but that's a lot better than, having any issues with things coming undone. All right, that should be good. Let that dry up, and it'll hold that carpet together. So I'm actually making this video a full year after I carpeted this boat. So I actually did this last winter. So I've fished on this for a full year. And there's 2 things that I would do different if I were to do this again. I'm super happy with how it turned out overall. But if I were to do it again, I would have went with 20-ounce carpet instead of 24-ounce carpet. And I would have chose thinner pad for the front deck. And the reason I say that, both of those work together to just make this front area up here where I stand all the time super thick. The thicknesses of both those 2 materials work together to make this area where I stand up here extra thick. And what I've noticed is my knees actually seem to be more wore out at the end of the day after fishing. If it's calm, it's fine, but when I'm fishing in like some waves or whatever, boat waves, wind waves, it just seems like my knees get wore out more. And I think it's just because this gives so much between the give in the carpet and the give in the pad. It's just too much. But overall, like I said, I'm completely happy with this. Thank you all for sticking around. I hope you found this video to be helpful. It's a rewarding process. I'm happy I did it. So I hope you all, find success in this as well. Thanks for sticking around. Be sure to hit the subscribe button right here if you can, and thank you all for watching.